Today's episode, I want to talk about the topic of food security and what the topic means, what it is, and why it's important. So, food security, for those of you guys who don't know, is a topic which is based upon the idea that we need safe, healthy food to eat, right? And so, the topic really became, and it's been an issue for a long time. Anytime there's an outbreak of like E. coli or some kind of disease that's threatening, human disease, where a particular virus or bacteria or something like that gets infects a food supply, they have to be able to track that food, where that came from, and where that food may have gone once it left the farm. So there's a whole tracking system in place for those types of measures, because at the end of the day, you don't want to pick up a head of spinach or a head of lettuce not knowing that it may be infected with E. coli, right? So we have to make sure and take steps to prevent those types of things from happening. But in the wake of COVID a couple of years ago, it really became a really hot topic again, because food security now, it's not just a matter of if there's a virus and how do we track food from one place to another. What happens to our food chain when all of our transportation gets shut down like it was in COVID? What happens when the labor can't get to the farm, and or even if they can get to the farm, what happens if the transportation, the roads are closed and the trucks can't get to where they need to go? We had a very well grooved in type of food web, in terms of not in terms of the natural food web, but in terms of how food gets from farm to your table. And that was disrupted quite a bit during COVID. And that really became an issue. In fact, now there's countries such as, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, countries in the Middle East and certain areas where they depend primarily on imported food for their sustenance to feed their population. Now they're really looking at measures on how they can increase their own local production in their own country, so that if something like COVID happens, or something like what happened with Russia and Ukraine, where Russia invades Ukraine and now they can't get the fertilizer they need, and so then it disrupts supply chains and production and that kind of stuff. And what happens when you're in a country where you depend your lifeblood and the food supply of your nation depends upon importing it from other countries, and then you can't get it anymore, either because of geopolitical reasons or a virus like COVID or something like that. Food security becomes a huge, huge issue, and it hasn't been really confronted until COVID came out. And that's kind of what happens when you have a big epidemic or pandemic. It becomes a real big deal because you weren't preparing for something like that. And of course, these countries, if they're not prepared, they can be devastated in a lot of ways. So these types of countries in the Middle East and other areas are looking for food security. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, food security, again, has been an issue for a long time. And we're also looking at an interesting point in history now here in 2022, because there's initiatives to improve and increase food production. How do we increase food production to feed the growing population, so that when we have 10 billion people or 11 billion or 12 billion people in 2050 and beyond, how are we going to produce enough food to feed all those people, right? That's a huge concern. And as of right now in 2022, there's a lot of initiatives in several countries where they want to reduce chemical use. They want to reduce chemical fertilizers. They want to reduce chemical, fuel usage. They want to reduce water usage. In other words, there's an environmental factor. So we're kind of at an interesting point, right? We need to grow more food in order to feed the growing population, but we can't grow that food in the same conventional manner we've been doing it over the last 40, 50, 60 years, because that method is not sustainable, and it's actually damaging to the environment, and it's damaging to human health, and it's not sustainable. It's actually reducing our topsoil and our soil health around the world dramatically. And so we've got these two forces that are fighting against each other. It's like environmental factors here and food production here. And of course, the farmer is in the middle. The governments are looking to regulate things to force farmers to do things a certain way. And the farmers are like, hey, I've still got to make a living. I still have to make enough money to feed my family. I can't, and not just feed my family with food, but also, pay for the rent, pay for the mortgage, pay for equipment, pay my labor, cover my basic expenses and provide a life for my family. And if you're going to tell me I have to cut my fertilizer cost in half without a better solution, then I'm in a really bad state. So in the wake of these challenges, of course, there's innovation in agriculture. And that's why we have this show. That's why we started this show, not just to talk about the Kiminasi crop booster, which is the best innovation in agriculture to hit the world since the last 60, 70 years, probably since the invention of the plow, to be perfectly honest. But because there's other innovations in agriculture which will really help with these problems as well. I've always believed, long before I even started here at Harvest Harmonics, that the solution to serious problems is to be creative and to innovate. It's not just to withdraw and contract and stop using stuff. It's about, how do we innovate? How do we create better cars that don't pollute the atmosphere? How do we create better growing methods so we don't have as much chemicals in our food or much damage to the atmosphere or the soil, etc.? How do we take care of our water supply? How do we do these things? How do we accomplish the goals we want to have and do so in a way that's sustainable from an environmental standpoint, from our own standpoint, etc.? And one of the gentlemen I had the pleasure of meeting several months ago, in fact, he and I are still communicating, and we're working together on some of these food security issues, because our Kiminasi crop booster is an amazing technology, but it requires an irrigation system. And there are places in the world that either because of rainfall, they don't need irrigation, or more likely because they're in arid deserts and various places where outdoor farming is not a realistic objective. These indoor farming facilities are able to produce high volume of food, high quantities of food. They're able to produce them close to urban centers, so you don't have travel issues of having to travel hundreds or thousands of miles from farm to grocery or to table. We can actually install these units close to urban areas on a small footprint, yet be very productive, grow very organically. And because this particular gentleman, his name is Ray Arrudia, and I'll give him a shout out. Hey, Ray. And his company name is Terra Firma Foods, or terrafirma.farm. I'll put the link in here after I remember it. I apologize. But you can search it up, Terra Firma. He's got indoor farming operations that are at scale for urban centers. We're talking about 50 to 100,000 square foot warehouses that are vertical farming operations based in soil, can utilize the Kiminasi plant technology to dramatically increase nutrient density and drive production in a very sustainable and healthy way. And of course, his system also has an energy neutral footprint, meaning it can generate enough energy to support the production of the entire plant, and it doesn't require to be powered by the grid. So we're not using the power grid to run these things, which is a big problem for some of these urban farms right now. They use a ton of energy to run all their systems, right? His particular model is energy self-sustained. Terra Firma Foods, thanks, Cisa. Appreciate that. So he's got a really cool operation, and he and I are going to be working together as he gets funding for his local operations here in the United States. But we're going to be reaching out to people in the Middle East and to various other areas where they're really looking for food security and sustainability and local food production, or maybe they didn't have local production, or their local production was not high enough quality or quantity to really feed their operation. So we want to be working together and working with the growers and the government officials in these countries to help you become more food secure. So that's just an example of how we can be innovative and use innovation to solve these problems. Look at what happened in Sri Lanka. They just said, you got to cut your fertilizer use in half. And I wish the governments of Sri Lanka would have contacted us, because had they done so, they could have given their farmers the Kiminasi plant booster. They could have kept their yield where at the same level it was before and used 50% less fertilizer. Unfortunately, they didn't do that, and they caused a very big food problem there. And of course, now we're going to be trying to work with the new government in Sri Lanka to help them out. But you have the same situations in the Netherlands, where they really cut the fertilizer usage and the fuel usage that the farmers can use there. And that's a big area of the world, a big food production area of the world. And in Canada, they're starting to do the same thing. Like I love the environment, and I love environmental and green issues, but sometimes we got to look at how to best solve these problems. And I personally don't think regulation is the best way, especially if you don't have a solution in place. Like the Kiminasi crop booster is a solution, and it will help these particular farms reduce their chemical use, reduce their fuel costs, reduce their water usage, and provide healthy, clean food for everybody to eat. And we want to work with every farmer, obviously, to help them do that, because it's going to improve their bottom line, and it's going to help improve the environment and our food supply as well. But if you're in an area, if you're in an area where you want to be setting up farming operations, or if you're a governmental official that's having some of these food security issues, or even if it's just on your mind as something that needs to get solved as we move forward into the future, then I want you to give me a call. In fact, I'll put my phone number here. You can give me a call directly at 727-324-6750. We can walk you through the Kiminasi Crop Booster program. We can also set up meetings with some of our partners around the world. We've been partnering with a number of different vendors, from farming applications that can track and measure output and inputs and different factors and help precision farmers become a lot more efficient. We've partnered with some vertical farming operations like Ray that I mentioned before, who can help make sustainable food in a food secure environment that's close to urban areas so that you don't have intense travel times or have to cross borders or things like that. We have worked with just a number of different, I mean, I can't even measure them all. We work with fertilizer companies, we work with food application companies, sensor companies, equipment companies, indoor farming, outdoor farming, pivot irrigation companies. We are building an entire network that's going to allow us to help farmers all over the world with innovative solutions that's going to make their operations more efficient. I've always said that, this whole goal of increasing food production by 30 or 50% by 2050 is not a bad goal. But if we can just reduce waste and make the food more accessible so that less of that food gets wasted, and improve shelf life by using technologies like the Kiminasi Crop Booster, we can actually solve a lot of the problems of poor food and starvation and hunger and these types of things, just by being innovative in how we're structuring how we grow the food, but also how we get the food from the farm to the table. So if you're out there, if you're a farming operation or you're a governmental official and you want to work with us and you want to work with innovative solutions that really help move us into the future in a sustainable way, in an environmentally friendly way, a healthy way for human health, and a way that's going to benefit your farmers and your farming operations without causing people to lose their jobs or lose their careers or those types of things. We want to help people make money as well. Then give us a call. We want to work with you guys. We want to improve the agriculture industry. And when I tell people our mission is to transform the agricultural industry from a chemical-based model to a physics-based model, we're doing that because the physics-based model is a lot more efficient. It's a lot more energy efficient, and it's a lot better solution going forward. So if you want to become part of the future of farming today, then give us a call and let's work together so we can bring that future for all mankind. Hope to hear from you guys very soon. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk again. Have a good day.